Vaius watched as his paladin friend walked up the hallway and disappeared into the large sanctuary hall before turning towards the door they had previously left behind. The boulder tumbled slightly inside the pit as Vaius walked over it with his heavy frame, reaching the door and quickly inspecting it for traps. After a minute, the blue Daemon confidently jiggled the door handle, realizing it was locked. Vaius inspected the door's lock as he reached into his leather satchel and brandished the 2 broken key pieces in his palm that they had wrestled from the mimic chest. The Daemon closed his fist around the broken key pieces and began chanting a spell of mending, opening his palm seconds later to reveal a now whole key. The satisfying sounds of locks being released relaxed Vaius as he turned the easy-fitting key, opening the door to reveal a dusty and dark room, much smaller than any previous chamber. From the looks of the table ahead of him and the many stacks of piled-up books that littered a far corner, Vaius had found himself a private study of sorts, although he wasn't sure how many studies also contained 5 prison cells. Vaius's yellow eyes pierced the darkness of the room, revealing the desk to be an alchemy table with many potions and vials perched atop it. On the other side of the room was a large pentagram with melted candles surrounding its border, with many bloodstains coloring the inside of it. Vaius walked forward to the table to begin collecting vials of different colored liquids before a sudden movement inside one of the cages threw the Daemon on the defensive.
Show yourself, monster, so that I may continue my campaign against your master,
Vaius boldly challenged. As he wearily approached, the smell of urine and defecation was overwhelming. Vaius strained to resist the fetid odor, looking in disgust towards the dilapidated cage. Before him stood an elderly woman, completely bare and emaciated. Her mouth, dripping with spit, was stained and soiled by the excrement she wallowed in.
Help me,
she pleaded, pressing her starved frame against the iron bars. Vaius met her gaze and jumped, seeing the empty black pits where her eyes once were. Vaius, visibly shaken, stepped back from the cage. The woman screamed again as her skin began to peel and burst from the force of her reaching out to Vaius.
help me!
Alabaster slowly exited the hallway into the grand sanctuary hall from the north wall. The hall seemed lit as if by daylight, magical in nature, but a strange decision for sure, considering the rest of the tomb's contents, Alabaster thought. It became clear that the door the knight had just entered through was not the main means of entry to the sanctuary hall. To the west of the room lay a grand archway with a familiar-looking wall of mountain and stone crumpled together. Maybe that caved-in passageway was what previously led to the tomb's entrance. Surely any widow wishing to see her husband wouldn't have to go through all this for such a task. The paladin of Kellumbor had wandered into the center of the grand sanctuary, between 2 rows of pews that lined the perimeter of the walls. A large red carpet divided the 2 rows of pews, lined with gold bordering, disturbed only by Alabaster's clunky greaves. The brilliant red carpet led to a podium of onyx atop a small flight of stairs. Alabaster suddenly realized he was not alone. Behind the onyx podium stood a menacing figure, clad in masterwork black steel armor, with a long sword hanging loosely from his right gauntlet. A black helmet laid resting on top of the podium, with steel wings protruding from either side with an open-faced design. The Black Knight had been watching the oblivious paladin as he marveled at the sanctuary hall, growling as he saw Alabaster finally notice him. A face eternally stretched in agony stared out across the sanctuary, his undeath causing his eyes to glow blood red and pierce through his wiry long black hair dangling down his decaying face.
Who approaches?
A disembodied face shrieked out from his mummified mouth. Well, if you must know, my name is Alabaster Williams III, but I prefer Alabaster the Daring. The holy paladin bowed as he flourished his blade, studying the Black Knight. The angry undead slowly walked around the onyx podium, picking his helmet up and donning it as he descended down the 3 steps towards Alabaster. You're an edge above the rest of your fellow undead cohorts, I see. Alabaster readjusted his armor atop his skinny frame as the black armored knight tightened his grip on his elaborate longsword.
My family that you speak of, knight, were not warriors as such as I. They were a proud and prosperous people who only sought to build a new life and help others do the same.
The Black Knight growled as he stopped 20 feet away from Alabaster on the red carpet. Slightly taken aback by the defense of his family, Alabaster slightly lowered his shield and sword.
My family's tomb has been desecrated, my body and soul turned to undeath, my very being, guarding a monster as he torments everything I once cherished for his own gain. And there is not a thing my will can do to stop him. He has told me of your efforts and ordered me to destroy you if you were to somehow make it this far. I do not wish to do so. I know you have laid many of my people to rest, but his power compels me otherwise. I do not take joy in what I must do next.
The Dark Knight changed his stance and almost charged before watching his paladin foe remove his Morion helm and toss his shield down to the floor, stopping the Black Knight in his tracks as a skull stared right through him. This necromancer's power is fading. I give you mine and another's word that you and your family will be avenged. Alabaster slowly walked forward as his skeletal jaw moved up and down. The paladin stopped just 5 feet away from the Black Knight and extended his thin blade forward into the air between them, issuing a challenge. I've given you my name, fellow knight. Now I demand yours before we begin so that I remember your plight, as I take your master's life in the name of Kellenborg and your family. The anger almost lessened in the Black Knight's glowing red eyes as he struggled a half-smile.
Nostro von Derrickson. I wish you luck, Derek Paladin, but I will not hold back.
A cold voice calmly ran through the Black Knight's helmet as he raised his longsword and tapped Alabaster's blade. Do your worst, that I may see your best. Both knights flourished their blades and stepped back 10 feet from one another to start their duel. Nostro charged with fierce vigor, swinging his longsword in a rising arc. With the deft maneuver, Alabaster nimbly dodged, and using his momentum countered with his own swing at the Black Knight's armor. Nostro, though grazed by Alabaster's sword, was clearly a seasoned combatant, and the 2 knights, both gripped by undeath, continued their back and forth of blades. Alabaster again dodged forward, but this time felt the force of Nostro's heavy gauntlet slam into his skull, followed up by a hip check that sent him stumbling backwards. Nostro quickly doubled up for a forward thrust of his longsword, and missing that, gripped his own blade to swing the weighted pommel of his weapon squarely into Alabaster's side. With a swift kick and sweep, Alabaster knocked Nostro prone, and made an attempt to end the duel there with a well-practiced swing of his blade. The Black Knight parried, rose to his feet with an almost unholy swiftness, and took a few paces back. Alabaster momentarily lowered his guard in response, just as Nostro sprang forward with a terrifying dropkick placed squarely in the knight's chest plate, sending both combatants into the pews in an armored heap. The Black Knight jumped to his feet, grabbed the blade of his sword with his hand, and swung the pommel in a vicious rebuke toward Alabaster's skull. Nostro continued his stance, using his sword's crossguard to snag Alabaster's breastplate to maneuver the paladin where he wanted him. As Alabaster was being shoved around, he suddenly felt the force of a boot to his left knee, buckling his leg and forcing him to kneel. Feeling the blade's crossguard lift from his breastplate, Alabaster immediately tumbled forward as he felt the swish of Nostro's longsword just miss the base of his skeletal neck. Alabaster spun around to see the Black Knight charging him with his longsword at the ready, giving him just enough time to brace his dueling sword for impact. With a loud clang and the screeching of metal caving in, Nostro looked down at his chest to see Alabaster's blade sticking through his body. A ghostly laugh emerged from the Black Knight as he stalked backwards menacingly.
Do better.
Creaked from Nostro's decaying mouth. Compelled by his master's will, the Black Knight rushed forward with Alabaster's blade still embedded in his chest. Alabaster, in awe of the Black Knight's unflinching resolve, dived for his shield, picking it up just in time to block another vertical swipe by Nostro. 3 more quick swipes of Nostro's longsword landed heavily against his foe's shining shield, keeping the paladin on his knees. Alabaster stood quickly through Nostro's offensive barrier and bashed the Black Knight back with a strong blow, pushing the sword in his chest further in. Alabaster stood heroically as he let the Black Knight recover from the attack, watching as Nostro coughed and hacked up a dark gelatin that stained the red carpet they dueled on. Nostro locked his red eyes on Alabaster, and though grievously wounded, once more charged forward. Alabaster prepared his stance and hurled his shield forth, stopping the Black Knight with staggering force as he felt divine magic burn through his body. Alabaster ran forward, caught his shield as it returned to him, and delivered a roundhouse kick which plunged the sword further into Nostro's chest, before spinning quickly and delivering a brash backhanded shield bash. Nostro, barely standing, swung his sword at the paladin with what strength he still felt, missing as Alabaster leaned backwards to dodge. Seeing an opening, Alabaster sprang forward and laid his hand upon Nostro's face through his open helm. "May Celeborn lead you to peace!" Alabaster screamed as holy energy shot through his hand, dissolving what rotting skin and muscle was left on Nostro's head. The Black Knight screamed as he was blinded, turning away and clutching his skull before feeling a quick kick to the back of his leg, knocking him to his knees. "Honestly, if I didn't have my shield and holy magic, you would have bested me in martial combat, Nostro. But I have a duty to you, and everyone else who has felt your master's influence," Alabaster explained as he rounded Nostro. The Black Knight felt the pain of the sword in his chest being ripped out of his chest cavity, listening to the sound of it cutting through the air as his foe flourished. Alabaster readied his sword to behead Nostro, stopping as the Black Knight undonned his dark helmet and dropped it to the floor. Nostro looked up to Alabaster from his hands, revealing a dirty, shaking skull, stopping the paladin for a split second as he suddenly saw himself in the fallen knight.
Thank you.
Rattled from Nostro as Alabaster's blade struck true into his foe's spine, beheading him. When the time came for Alabaster's end, would he fight against his fate as valiantly as Nostro had, or just let Celeborn's Doom Guides finally fulfill their duties? Alabaster walked back to his own Morion helmet, still seeing Nostro's defeated face in his mind as he slipped the extra padded helmet over his skull. Movement to his left alerted him to raise his shield and sword again, only seeing a bewildered Vaius emerge from the hallway passage into the sanctuary hall.
Not in Daemon.